Billionaire investor and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein went to prison for over a year after he pleaded guilty to one count of solicitation of minors for prostitution. That plea deal was negotiated between the federal government and Epstein's lawyer, including Alan Dershowitz. Now, Alan Dershowitz is being accused of having sex with an underage girl in a lawsuit filed against the government by some of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged victims. A woman known as Jane Doe number 3 said Epstein forced her to have sex with Alan Dershowitz on multiple occasions. A court motion filed last month by attorneys Paul Cassell and Bradley Edwards says, quote, in addition to being a participant in the abuse of Jane Doe number 3 and other minors, Dershowitz was an eyewitness to sexual abuse of many other minors by Epstein and several of Epstein's co-conspirators. Alan Dershowitz has denied the allegations and has called on attorneys for Jane Doe number 3 to be disbarred. But on Tuesday, Bradley Edwards and Paul Cassell, those attorneys, filed a defamation lawsuit against Alan Dershowitz. Joining me now from Miami is a Harvard Law School professor and attorney, Alan Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, when this story first broke, you said you were going to file a defamation complaint against these lawyers. They've now started it against you. But first, let's get right to where I know you want to go, which is deal with these specific accusations as we know them. What is your response to them?
Well, they're totally false and made up. I was never in the same state in New Mexico. At the time she said I had sex with her in New Mexico. I can prove it by documentary evidence. I was never on Jeffrey Epstein's island where she said I had sex with her. At any time she was on the island, I can prove that by documentary and eyewitness testimony. And I was never on a plane with her where she said I had sex with her, and I can prove that by documentary and eyewitness testimony. The story is totally, completely fabricated from top to bottom. I am thrilled that they're suing me for defamation. The only reason I was going to sue them is I'm not interested in collecting money. I'm interested in putting them under oath because right now they have accused me of these horrendous things without a single affidavit, without a single piece of evidence. They just threw it into a pleading in a case where I'm not even a party. It's like a drive-by legal shooting. And my only responses could be to get them under oath. I have challenged her to formally accuse me of rape, and I will waive statutes of limitations and subject myself to a prosecution. But if she accuses me of rape formally, she goes to jail for making a false charge. I have challenged the lawyers to go under oath and repeat these charges, or to repeat them to you, so I can sue them for defamation. But they're hiding behind litigation privilege. They put it in this legal document. Imagine if any of you out there were accused in a legal document of doing something as horrible as this, and you're told there's no legal recourse at all. But believe me, there will be a legal recourse. And the terrible thing is this, the effect it's going to have on rape victims, because rape victims generally tell the truth. This woman made up this whole story. And when I prove it conclusively, beyond any doubt, by physical and documentary evidence, it will hurt other rape victims. And that's the real problem. And these lawyers pretend to be victims' rights lawyers. They are unprofessional, unethical. They didn't do adequate checking. They filed these charges, and they will pay a heavy price for having done so.
In one of the points you've made about this, you show that they actually also claim that former President Clinton was on Mr. Epstein's island at some point, and your information and research seems to indicate that the Secret Service records indicate that President Clinton's never been on that island.
That's true. Not only that, but they've accused at least 2 former prime ministers as well. And, you know, you shouldn't ever falsely accuse a president or a prime minister because they have Secret Service with them all the time. And the documentary evidence is clear and conclusive. This is a serial liar who has lied about so many people. She claimed to have met the Queen. Buckingham Palace denied that. Why anyone, any responsible lawyer would believe her and file this kind of charge? It's like, you know, putting graffiti on a bathroom door and then running away. They picked on the wrong innocent person. I have the resources and the will. I'm 76 years old. I'm retired. I will drain my bank account. I will do everything in my power, not only to prove that I didn't do it, and I think everybody who's seen this understands that that's the case, and I will prove it to any skeptics by documentary evidence, but that they willfully and deliberately made this up in order to gain a litigation advantage, line their pockets with money, and they have to pay a heavy consequence for this, and they will.
Professor Dershowitz, before we go, I want to ask you about something you said yesterday about the attack in France.
Right.
In an interview with Newsmax, you as a headline of the article says, Alan Dershowitz, France reaped what it sowed in the Paris
I didn't
attack.
say that.
That's their headline. Let me give you a quotation, and I hope
Sure.
I hope you will tell me you didn't say this. They have you quoted as saying about France, they reward every terrorist.
That's true.
That is absolutely not true. You know it's
Absolutely.
not true.
They have the worst record of any country in Europe on terrorism.
You want to stand by, they reward
They have
every
released
terrorist.
They have released convicted. Let me give you the context in which I said this.
It's a crazy thing to say.
I'm
France
sorry, it's
does
right.
not reward
They have the worst
every
record
terrorist
of any
Do you want to say
country
they've
in
rewarded
Europe.
a few terrorists? Are
No.
you really going to sit here and say
Let
they
me tell
rewarded
you,
every terrorist?
Virtually every terrorist who has been convicted and sent to prison in Paris has either gotten out. The point I was making was a general one, and that is that they voted for Palestinian statehood for a country that was built on terrorism. They have done everything to avoid joining the fight on terrorism. I feel terrible for these people. I feel terrible for
Virtually
France.
every country in the world has voted for that statehood. You know that.
The United States hasn't, and many
Virtually
other
every
countries
country
have
in the
not.
world.
Well, good countries don't vote for it.
So
and when
most
you vote,
countries
when
in the
you
world
vote to
are Alan
reward,
Dershowitz bad countries.
I've written a book called Why Terrorism Works. And what I do is I prove in that book that terrorism is rewarded, and particularly all through Europe. Terrorism is rewarded. Europe is part of the problem. France is part of the problem. I feel terribly sorry for the victims, but France is part of the problem. Maybe this will give them a wake-up call and have them join the war against terrorism rather than becoming part of the problem of facilitating and rewarding terrorism. I stand by that statement.
I will advise you, just for the credibility of your own judgment on anything else you ever say publicly, don't ever say that France rewards every terrorist.
Sir,
that
I don't
is
need
false,
your advice on
and it's
this
crazy.
issue, and
Alan
please don't
Dershowitz,
generalize
we are out
from
of time.
this to other
we are out of
issues.
time. I'm sorry
Well,
you didn't apologize for that.
Of course
Thanks
not.
for
I
joining
stand
us.
by it. Thank you.
Chris Hayes is up next.